thank you guys for staying for our discussion. I gotta say, that was a beautiful film. And I say beautiful because next time someone says, why do NFL players kneel? We can, sit down 2 hours and spend 2 hours watching what the Black experience is like in America. That was 1992. In 2017, they shoot. Imagine what would happen then. Dan, I gotta say, man, you had so much footage in this film. Just amazing archival research. But what got people, and I noticed some people in the audience gasping when we saw the image of Rodney King being beaten with reckless abandon. That's like the first viral image or images or video that I saw that presaged what we see today. Talk about using that as the crux for this film.
When well, just to give a little context into the project, the producers Simon Chin and Jonathan Chin had come up with the idea of doing a film about the 92 civil unrest, knowing that the 25th anniversary was coming up. And they had set that up with Nat Geo, but that was kind of the extent of it, and they came to us to possibly direct. And one of the first conversations TJ and I had was exactly that. We were like, you couldn't deny the relevance that it had to current events. And we talked a lot about, that same thing. That tape, I was 13 when that happened, but it's seared into my memory, and it really was. And so we started talking about, it also coincides with a lot of people having VHS camcorders. In fact, one thing I later learned in doing the research was George Halliday didn't go out to film because he saw the police beating Rodney King. He heard the police pulling somebody over and just thought, oh, this is something I could film with my new camera. And when he got it out and filmed it, that had started unfolding, just to show you how possibly prevalent something like that was to happen, that it wasn't even that it was strange to him. He was just gonna record the police pulling somebody over. And so we talked more about that, and we thought, what if we could approach the film in that way? It was one of the reasons that we did that, and thought, if this was the advent of VHS camcorders and people being on the street, could we bring people back into the experience via that kind of point of view? We talked also at times about putting contemporary footage in, and even had some cuts at the end where we had some of that stuff, but it was so omnipresent to us that we just felt it didn't need to be said.
Speaking of footage, what made you guys decide to put the death of the 15-year-old Latasha Harlins in there? Because I think that is something that history washes over. Yes, Rodney King was beat and video was public, but there was a young black girl killed who was not stealing. What was the deciding
Also
factor?
caught on videotape too. The parallels of the incidents were kind of staggering. Again, I was 13 when it happened. Growing up in the Midwest, I didn't know anything about Latasha Harlins. And so in doing the initial research, her name kept coming up, and so I started looking into it more. And then we also did a lot of outreach to, even though we weren't going to have interviews, we wanted to talk to people that had lived through it to make sure we were showing this responsibly and kind of documenting the experience, that when people watched it, they felt like we had captured it. And that was in conversations, many people said it was more about Latasha Harlins than it even was about Rodney King. And so then it just felt very important to us that we provide that storyline in there. And even in going through in the footage, you hear her name invoked as much, if not more, than Rodney King.
There is no narration to the film. I mean, it's the images and the viewer, and you have us sucked into this period of time, and it's like we're experiencing again. Why no narrator? Why just the images and just letting us react to it?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, I shouldn't say a lot of reasons, but a lot of things we talked about and how we kind of formulated the approach. And I can kind of go over some of them. I mean, one of the big things is TJ and I as filmmakers, as documentary filmmakers, we have a kind of cinema verite background, and we've been extremely hesitant. We've been approached to do projects that deal with history, and we've always been really hesitant to do that because as storytellers, we want to put the audience in the moment. And so we talked about this, and again, inspired by the idea of the beating of Rodney King being captured by a citizen. And we thought, what if we treated it like the footage that is out there are just the camera operators that we would have hired to go and try to document this history as it was unfolding. Then we'd go into the edit and try and create the film out of that. So that was one reason, just formally. The other was the themes and just everything in this is so complicated, and it felt really strange to us to have a talking head speaking from contemporary time, telling you the reasons that this happened when the reasons are so complex, and that, I don't know, it just didn't feel right to us to say, like, it happened because of this and that. And we also just felt, I don't know, TJ and I are just like feeling people. And we read a lot, and a lot of that stuff feels right written, but we're filmmakers and we want to make something that could hopefully transport you back into that time and feel the feelings.
The congressman, she did a good bit of narration. Mark, I am so glad you were here on this panel. I have a question for you, but before I ask, I want you to tell the audience a little bit about Policy Link and what you do there, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Mark Philpart, and I work at Policy Link. Policy Link is a national research and action institute focused on advancing racial equity. We're headquartered right over in Oakland, but we work all over the country. The work that I do is mostly focused on race and gender justice, and I manage a coalition called the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, where we work to improve outcomes for that population through policy advocacy. And so a lot of the issues that are articulated around, police abuse are the types of issues that we wrestle with from a policy perspective, working in the legislature and the state capitol and other places throughout California.
Policy. There was a map just on the screen for, I don't know, maybe a second. Small box, red box, Koreatown, and then it said black area. And I think that's what I got the first time I saw this, was that we're talking about the divisions of where people lived and why cops decided not to go in, why people in a certain area would do the things they did, and it has to do with policy, particularly government policy, housing discrimination. Mark, talk about how you felt seeing these images again of the black neighborhoods being, destroyed and terrorized.
Yeah. Well, I mean, aside from my professional perspective, I also grew up in Los Angeles, and so was a part of that. And I think from my perspective, this event really shaped my worldview and put me on the trajectory that I'm on. And thanks to you, Dan and TJ, for just creating such a powerful and raw film. I think it is one of the most honest and graphic depictions of the civil unrest and all the many viewpoints of the people who were involved. And so I just want to thank y'all for that. You know, the way that I see it is kind of through that lens. So it's both it evokes very real personal feelings for me, but also, you know, I see it as this, you know, within the social and political context of the work that I do. And so understanding how, you know, you mentioned racial covenants and how these laws have played a role in creating neighborhoods of concentrated poverty that are overwhelmingly Black and Latino in many urban cores and now even peri-urban, and how in those places you have this dragnet policing happening where you know, you are more likely to be stopped, engaged by a police officer than if you were to be in another community, and what effect that has then on neighborhood stabilization. You know, Washington Post published this article a couple years ago on the Black men missing, right? And where are they? Many of them are in the criminal justice system. And so, you know, all of it is kind of snowballed, and I think the film does a good job of capturing so much of it, but there's so much that is not said too about the history and the social and political context that has created this this powder keg of conditions that we see kind of resulting in the civil unrest. And so I think that, you know, as people who are interested in you know, wanting to learn more and wanting to do something, I think it's really important to educate yourself, to dig deeper into some of these issues and better understand how concentrated poverty, over-policing, failed schools are really part of this whole host of failed, challenging institutional problems that further racism. So,
I guess this is, I'm going to ask you, Dan, and then I'm going to flip to you, Mark. You're doing a film, you and TJ are doing a film on the 25th anniversary of the LA riots. What I saw is a film on police brutality. Did you realize that what you were doing then would be relevant to the discussion that's happening right now?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think that was part of the attraction to doing it for us. I mean, these are conversations that TJ and I have on a daily basis. Most of our work tends to, in some ways, revolve around class and race, and but we're also just, you know, you can't talk about America without talking about this. And I think as filmmakers, we're just kind of observers, right? And observing that history means acknowledging it, right? as much as and as often as our country doesn't want to. So yeah, it was omnipresent in going into it. The real challenge was, how do you know, how much context can you provide with the approach that we chose? That was a fine line that I think I can't be the one to decide whether or not we did that or not, but it was, you know, something we constantly talked about. Yeah, I mean, what is happening today reverberates through this film, but it's part of the reason we didn't include any of that footage is I don't have a lot of faith that that's not going to reverberate if somebody watches this in 10 years. So I don't have a lot of faith that somehow we're going to correct this problem. And so, yeah, we wanted this to be timeless in a way that somebody could watch it in 2030 and not say, why are they showing me this random stuff